Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Barely There podcast. So I did make a little bit of a teaser on the Twitter account this week about what came in the mail straight from 1978, the Garfield Chicago Bears mug. One of the only pieces of Garfield merch I could find surrounding around the Chicago Bears. He's even carrying a little hot dog, probably about the size of Lucas right there.
I'll be back in 3 seconds, Duke. Hold on.
Lucas is going to get his mug too. Anyway, while he's gone, this is the Barely There podcast. I'm Duke Coughlin. You can follow me at that pod guy Duke on Twitter. I'm with Lucas Perfetti when he comes back. You can follow him on Twitter at LucasPerfetti46. Also follow us at Barely There Pod on Twitter. We're also live on YouTube if you want to be involved in the conversation. And Lucas shows up with the same Garfield mug just because we are just total, complete, and utter jagoffs.
See, I'm starting to think that Garfield's more of a compliment more than anything now. Like, the more I've looked into it, that does smell like 1970 something. Like, when I got it in, the inside of that cup smells like the inside of an old person's house.
Oh, dude, mine smells like the inside of a fucking ashtray. Like, there's some like black in there.
Yeah, no, mine's definitely worn out. I don't know if I'll ever actually drink a beverage from it. But also just an elite purchase. It's a great thing to have. I had it right there on the kitchen counter. I need to keep it in the office permanently to go with the decor. Been working on it, you know.
Yeah, no.
How you doing, dude?
No, 100%, dude. Just God, the old. This is just the easiest $20 I ever spent. Like the best fucking investment I've ever made for this podcast.
I've spent $20 on a lot worse.
Yeah, no, 100%. But yeah, dude, honestly, it's looking like Garfield just might be our mascot at this point. We'll have to hit up like Viacom and all that. Maybe get a deal brewing together.
Or just like an edit with us two and Garfield, like an animation edit as our one of our logos. That would be pretty dope too.
We should see if they like have like a Garfield live action show, like with doing a Garfield suit. We just go pose with fucking pictures of that guy.
That'd be great.
Then we dress up your dog as like fucking Bane to show like the size difference between Bane and Garfield. We're just big Garfield guys now.
Oh yeah, that'd be incredible.
But anyway, back on task. Now that we got that out of the way, trust me, me and Lucas have been dying to fucking tell you about our wonderful Garfield mugs. That were created while Walter Payton was still in the league.
Actually created, I think, during his best season, if I'm not mistaken.
1978, was that his MVP year?
I want to say
I think it was 77 or 78, one of the two.
It was definitely around that time. Either way.
I mean, dude, Garfield could have been a big Walter Payton guy, and for that, we thank Garfield just for pleasuring us with his existence on this fucking I'm a Bears fanatic mug. But anyway, kind of because we have already flown off the rails in the first 5 minutes here.
No, you're right. 1977.
Damn,
MVP.
Close.
It's close.
That would even been more clutch. But anyway, so over the past week, we've had Bears mini camp just kind of rolling on through. We just got a new 1920 Bears Avenue or whatever that
1920 Football Drive. I didn't even know that was coming back up.
Yeah, that just dropped today. Gave that a watch before we came on here. Some really cool stuff about Kyler Gordon, Jaquan Brisker, kind of the pro days and whatnot. But yeah, minicamp, it's been kind of a process, and there's been a couple situations where we've run into already that it's kind of been the blimp on the radar, like whereas fans are surprised of who's on the field at what times. More specifically, in recent history, it would be Tevin Jenkins at right tackle and Larry Borum at left tackle. And probably the hottest one right off the presses has to be Kindle Vildor playing with the number one secondary on the field. Lucas, I know you made a tweet about that. How you feeling about that?
Well, I mean, to preface it for everyone that didn't hear the press conferences, Eberflus did say don't read much into it, and it's a what do you call it? More of a conditioning thing. But if it really is a conditioning thing, I'm all for it. Like, we've talked about this before. We've talked about essentially how this team has been underachievers. Like the culture that was set was underachieve. Your spot is your spot. No one's going to take it. And that doesn't drive competition. So if your starting corner, who was your number one corner last year, who actually had a pretty damn good season. And I think could be argued to be definitely a top 15 guy. And maybe you could argue him into the top 10 if he has another really good season. So to have him after trading Khalil Mack saying, yeah, you know what? You're not in shape for camp. I'm going to have Kindle play with the ones. Like, that's right there. You're putting every motherfucker on notice. Like, everyone is on notice. And I love that aspect of what's going on right now, because I'm just tired of seeing dudes that didn't play hard. Like it was infectious. You notice Dave Montgomery and Roquan Smith all last year just because of the amount of effort they put in on the field. It was evident every single play. So dude, the more the merrier. Like, I am not emotionally attached to anyone on this team. There's no one on this team that I'm truthfully emotionally attached to. There's guys that I like. There's guys I'd be sorry to see go. But at the end of the day, like, it's about the Chicago Bears getting better. And whoever is going to be the best person in that spot in Eberflus's eyes is what we got to roll with.
Yeah, and I think Eberflus touched on a couple interesting things at his press conference, but to kind of touch on this in particular, it just screams accountability. It's holding everybody to a certain standard. Maybe doing a little bit tongue in cheek, not basically telling Jalen like, hey, what the hell? Why weren't you here? It's more or less like, hey man, you weren't here for the first week. So, you're not going to be on first team. You know what I mean? It's one of those like, hey, you got to get your feet under you. These guys have been here day one. They showed up the second we opened the building, and you weren't here. I mean, it's not something that I feel like it's going to be held against them like in the long run, but it's going to be more or less like, Jalen, prove why you belong with the ones. You know what I mean? Just show us, because this is our first time seeing you. And you think there would be a little bit more motivation towards, having your head coach get a good glance at you day one from the very, very start. Like, I know there was a lot of people that were jumping down Eddie Jackson's throat just for missing the first day. You know what I mean? And there was actually a pretty legit excuse of why he missed that.
He was at like a funeral or something, right?
Yeah, it was. I think he might have actually had like a dental surgery or something like that. I could be wrong.
Okay.
But I don't know off the top of my head, but it came out to be a pretty legit excuse, and Eberflus didn't seem phased about it at all. Whereas like Jalen missing that first week, that's that's a week. That's a week you're not there. That's a week you're not in the building, and you can only see so much on film before you actually have to go look at a guy on the field. And I think that's what Matt Eberflus really wants to drive forward. Like, hey, we understand this is voluntary. This isn't mandatory or anything like that. But like, we need guys here. If you want to be here for the long run, if you want to be here to truly build a winning team, a winning program, a winning culture, like, we need everybody all in. And I think that's why, like, he's been really complimentary of guys like, Roquan Smith, Dave Montgomery, Justin Fields. He actually did. He's the one thing that's really been
huge on Kyler Gordon. He's been giving a ton of compliments too.
Yeah, and Jaquan Brisker as well.
Yeah, and that's one thing. I think there's tension there from earlier, because people were saying that something happened where Jalen Johnson, I guess, was getting criticized a little bit via practice, and like some of the reporters noticed that something happened. I can't really remember. It was like a week or two ago in the last camp practices. But either way, there was kind of some tension there, and people were already insinuating like, oh, he's all over Kyler Gordon. He doesn't really care about Jalen Johnson. Trade Jalen Johnson, because you know how shit progresses really quickly. And yeah, I think it's just one of those. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Like, everyone's being held accountable. And if you're not here for a week, like, you're going to work your way back up. We don't care if you're a number one corner from that fucking 1-6 games. Like, we do not care. That's pretty much what he's saying.
Yeah. Well, and I think anybody who's really like, because we were just talking about why Jalen should feel the way that he does, but even on the flip side of that, like, you want to challenge these guys, especially the guys are talented and maybe aren't completely all in yet. I always think of, and it's crazy because of how it all turned out, but I remember Vic Fangio inheriting a young cornerback that he wasn't totally high on. Had some questions about his motor, about how much he really wanted to play, especially when it came to injuries. And that guy was Kyle Fuller. And Kyle Fuller ended up being the prototypical cornerback you want in Vic Fangio's system. Even followed Vic Fangio to Denver eventually. You know what I mean? Like, that's how that type of stuff is built, especially with defense coordinators. Like, they want to challenge these guys. They want to see what the fuck you're made of. They want to see how you respond to criticism, how you respond to adversity. Like, every head coach I've ever met in my life loves bringing up that point of overcoming adversity. And this is a perfect example right here, man. Jalen Johnson, yeah, he's shown a lot his first 2 seasons in the league. You know, Lucas, I know you're a big fan of him personally. I have been as well, you know what I mean? Especially what he does against like a Devontae Adams against, you know, versus the Packers.
That's
But but you want to challenge those guys. You want to try to get the absolute most out of them. And some guys, they need that kick in the ass. And, you know, maybe Jalen, maybe he runs on that shit. You know, maybe he likes that type of attention. Because I don't think that was something we were getting in the locker room last year. And I'm hoping it's a change in the right direction.
And Fuller just got signed by the Ravens. I'd love to know what the contract is for, too, because obviously a lot of people were just slandering the shit out of the guy when he was having a rough season after being cut and signed by the Broncos. And I don't even think he was starting towards the end of the year. But they had a lot of really good corners over there too. He came into the system late. Maybe there wasn't a ton of buy-in. Maybe there wasn't a ton of motivation. I don't know really what happened, but for the Ravens to sign him, like the Ravens usually have a really stacked DB room. So I'd love to see what they actually gave him and see if he's actually going to make the team and compete for a starting spot or just be like quality veteran depth. I'm not 100% sure, but I do think the Ravens run a similar defense to the Bears. I know they did at least a long time ago with the connections with Rex Ryan, Chuck Pagano, Vic Fangio. Like that, there was a ton of connections there. So I would assume with Harbaugh still being there, I'm not going to say they haven't evolved at all, but you know, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you, say I know the exact scheme, but I believe they run a similar scheme to what Fangio likes to run. So I definitely want to see how that progresses because a lot of people were out on Kyle Fuller. And the thing about Jalen is here's the, I like Jalen. I think he's a quality corner. I don't know if he has the athleticism to be that top tier corner. And I'm not saying you have to be athletic to be a top tier corner, but like, I just feel like he has a lot better matchup. Like his matchup against Devontae Adams, he did a great job. Devontae's a great receiver. Did a pretty good job, I think, 2 years ago on Keenan Allen when they played the Chargers. Like he actually, like those are the types of receivers he actually does a really good job on because they play the outside, because they're running a lot of, because they're a little bit slower and they're usually isolated on one side of the formation, you know? So he does do well in space. He's a press corner, but I don't think like he's necessarily a perfect fit in Eberflus's system. If that's foreshadowing anything in the future, I do think Kyler Gordon is an exact perfect fit for Matt Eberflus's system. And I do like the pairing of them together. It kind of reminds me of prime Kyle Fuller when Prince came in for those couple of years and like they played really well. One was their press corner, one was their off corner. Like I really like what Jalen Johnson and Kyler Gordon could do together. I could see even Kyler coming into the slot a little bit if to actually travel with number one receivers that play the slot, like you know, I guess Christian Kirk is the number one and what's it called, or a Cooper Kupp, or just one of those types of receivers. You know, if they play the Raiders and Hunter Renfrow is playing in the slot, that's probably, you know, I would like to see or Kyler Gordon on Hunter Renfrow and Jalen Johnson on Devontae Adams. But I've just kind of gone on a little tangent. Either way, he's a good player, you know, like he's a really good player. And I think people are reading a little bit too much into it, but I like the idea of everyone's got to earn their keep. Doesn't matter what your position was last year, got to earn your keep. And that's how it should be. It's 100% how it should be.
Yeah, and you know, kind of to your point about moving Kyler Gordon around, I'm really interested to see once we get to training camps a little bit down the road, where Thomas Graham fits into the equation. You know, obviously Kendall Vildor was getting first team reps, you know, this past week, and that's fine. I'm not necessarily totally in on Kendall Vildor after what I saw last year, but potentially he could thrive a little bit better in a slot corner role. But I really, really like the upside of a guy like Thomas Graham, and I'd be really interested to see how Eberflus feels about him as well. Obviously commented on him a little bit before the draft, but nothing really like kind of, oh, this is my guy or anything like that. So
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see how a lot of that works out. One thing Eberflus did touch on, I guess this will be the last point Eberflus wise, and I guess it'll kind of go into what Cole Kmet was saying. But Eberflus, in his past few interviews, anytime he's been asked about Justin Fields, like the number one thing that he brings up is his deep ball. Like,
that's exactly what I was going to say.
Very impressed by his deep ball. And for a lifetime defensive coordinator to be talking about a quarterback's deep ball and kind of really glowing about it, that's definitely something that pokes in the right direction. And it kind of makes
that quote was, man, that's a pretty deep ball.
Yeah.
He throws a pretty deep ball or something like that. I mean, we all saw it last year. He was fucking. I mean, you can't deny the arm talent in the deep range. Like, sure, you could say he doesn't release the ball fast enough or whatever you want to say about him, but you cannot deny his ability to fit the ball right where it needs to be when he's throwing the ball deep. It's just unbelievable, actually.
Yeah, and that's like one of the hardest things to get down as an NFL quarterback. It almost feels like you can build in reverse with that because Justin has that. You can get him to make the layups. You know what I mean? And that's going to be the biggest step I feel for Justin Fields moving forward in his development. But kind of jumping into what Cole Kmet was talking with the media yesterday about. One thing that really stuck out to me, I believe he was asked about what's different this year within the offense, and without trying to comment too much about the previous culture, the previous head coach, obviously, because I don't think Cole was looking to make a headline. Two things that he brought up were really being physical at the point of attack from the tight end position, which is kind of a change. Whereas, it was a lot of brush and goes, a lot of bump and runs type things from the tight end position. And he also talked about Justin Fields getting a chance to move around. I'm pretty sure he brought that up about 3 times in his answer. And that really bodes well to anybody who has kind of been under the idea of wanting to run the football and being able to run play action effectively because of being able to effectively run the football. Maybe I'm reading a little too much into it, but I really think that's where Cole Kmet was kind of going with that, because that was something we really didn't get to see really through any of the Nagy era besides year one, was getting the quarterback on the outside and letting him make a throw out there, and using a power run game, using a volume run game to try to set up play action down the field. And I think that can really benefit a guy, not only in Justin Fields, but a guy in Cole Kmet, moving out there, being able to make a play in space, whether somebody wants to respect the advanced statistics or not. Cole Kmet was one of the better tight ends in football last year at creating separation. That's a fact. Catching the football and being able to work himself out of coverage when it's thrown into coverage, being able to kind of battle with a defender, that's going to be the biggest step for Cole Kmet moving forward. But overall, I came away with that interview and Eberflus's comments about Fields feeling really good about the direction of the offense.
Yeah. And it's funny because that kind of inspires me. He talked about how he's going to attend tight end U and really focus this offseason on aggressive blocking, as you said, aggressive run blocking at the point of attack. And I'm just looking here at Sharp Football Stats. They have personnel grouping frequency, and it's really interesting. 90% of the teams are a majority of the time in 11 personnel. You're going to have 3 wide receivers, a running back, and a tight end. And then you hear about, you hear 12, 21. For anyone that doesn't know this, that's listening, it's really just telling you how many running backs and tight ends are on the field. So you're going to have your 5 linemen. If you're running 21 personnel, that's 2 running backs, 1 tight end, and however many receivers. You know what I'm saying? So it's just pretty simple. That's all it means. So if you're ever confused about people talking about types of personnel, that's literally all it means when it comes to personnel. Concepts, schemes, stuff like that, way more complex. But one of the things that I kind of find interesting is you look at the Rams. They're like a strictly 11 personnel team. The Green Bay Packers, the Cincinnati Bengals, Buffalo Bills, 11 personnel team. You think about all those teams have multiple wide receivers, or they had a dominant number 1 wide receiver. Now, when you look at the teams that are running a lot of 12 personnel, who was it? Miami. You look at teams like the Bears actually ran quite a bit of 12 personnel. But then the thing that's the most interesting is that San Francisco runs 34% of the time out of a 21 personnel. So a running back, they're using a fullback, and they're using a tight end. I see the Bears really being one of those leaders in 21 personnel. From everything I've gotten, from all the interviews, from everything they're talking about, from signing a fullback, from using tight ends. I think they might even run a lot of 22 personnel. And from the lack of signings in the wide receiver department, I just truly think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see a ton of tight ends, fullbacks, and running backs on the field at all times. So if you have a quarterback, if everything's bunched up, and you have a quarterback that runs a fucking 4-3, it's going to cause problems for the defense because they're either going to have to dedicate guys to the box or they're going to have to say, listen, we need to account for this run with either a spy, something like that. And that's when you can get linebackers to move out of the middle of the field and get layup slants that go to the fucking house. So I think people, when looking at Cole Kmet and just the tight ends in general, I kind of went off topic here, but that's just, it inspired me to talk about that because I've been looking at this chart and just in general what the Bears did in the last few years. And I think that's where we're leaning towards being a 21 personnel team. I mean, the Niners ran it 34% of the time, which is fucking absurd. And they only ran 12 personnel 10% of the time. You know, everyone's going to dominate in 11 because at the end of the day, second and long, third and long, you need receivers on the field. You need to spread the field out. But I think that's funny. Also, the only team to run us and who else was it? Us and the New York Jets were the only team to run a 0-4 personnel, which means 4 tight ends and 0 running backs. So thank you, Matt Nagy.
Yeah, no, that just shows like how decimated we were on the offensive line.
Yeah, I can only imagine no, that is exactly what it is. It was probably on the goal line, but either way, like, give me a fucking break. You don't have a running back in.
Yeah, like, well, what are you trying to accomplish on that? But yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. Just because we were so desperate to keep Justin Fields on his, not on his back, I guess. But even like with that statistic, it still kind of seemed like Matt Nagy was leaving him out to dry. You're gonna have to send me those charts though. I really do want to check that out. That's some really good information. I really like the idea of kind of doing a similar system to what the Niners do, because when you have a quarterback like the Niners have with, say, Jimmy Garoppolo, getting him into space, using his mobility a little bit, and trying to get more one-on-one matchups with wide receivers because teams have to load the box against 49ers because of how well they run the football. I think that's an ideal situation for a guy like Justin Fields, at least in like year two of his development, because getting ideal matchups for a guy like Justin Fields who can throw the ball effectively down the field and move a lot better than a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo, it'll bode really well. You know, I really like the point that you made about, you know, getting a spy and kind of opening up the middle of the field for slant routes. You know, a guy like Byron Pringle comes to mind. That would be perfect for a slant route. You know what I mean?
Well, just none of that stuff was
ever. Even your boy Velus Jones, like that is like the ideal setup in the slot for a guy like that. You know, get the ball to a guy with speed when they're so focused on a guy like Justin Fields who has speed on the outside, and you have a guy like Darnell Mooney who's a legit deep threat with his speed as well. Like that bodes really well for your offense. You know, people look at it as like a power run type offense, and they're like, oh, this is like 1970s Chicago Bears. They're just gonna pound it, you know, up the gut type shit. But it's like there's a lot of offensive minds in the league doing this type of thing right now. You know, like, dude, even to another example, look at what Baltimore does with Lamar. Like they get Lamar ideal matchups because they use his speed to his advantage and they run the hell out of the football. Like that's something that I see the Chicago Bears doing. I'd really like you to send me that.
Well, and the second and third most used 21 personnels, the Ravens and the Patriots. So you could see it being one's a fucking pretty much a triple option team, the other's a pro style team, and then the what's it called? The Niners have a very inventive offense. So I could see it going any way, but it's interesting how different teams use different personnel groupings to their advantage. And no, I don't think it's going to be 22 dives all fucking day. Like I don't think it's going to be that at all. I think you're going to be able to build a lot more bread and butter plays by running this type of offense and execute simple plays to then set up other plays. You know, it was always a mixed bag with Nagy. It was always just like, okay, we're going to run this. Now we're going to switch out all of our personnel. Like, no, I'm okay with seeing the exact same personnel throughout an entire drive. If you're controlling it, why would you let your fullback go on a 1st and 10 after you've just been averaging 4 yards a clip and you just converted on a 3rd and 4? Why would you want to fix anything that's not working? You know, personnel changes should not be after every single play, and that's just something that happened far too often. So, you know, one thing I want to get to before you jump in is like there's this trend going on right now, and I get it, you want to compare all the second year quarterbacks, but like it's so fucking stupid of comparing second year quarterbacks and who is in the best situation, and it's pretty much all just talking about weapons. First, I don't think a couple of I'm not even going to comment too much on it. I think each situation is different. And the one thing that's very different about Justin Fields' situation is that he's the only one that hasn't had someone as a constant GM for at least 2 years. So all those other GMs drafted their quarterback. A lot of them were there well prior to it. I think it was the Jets who promoted someone from within. So he was in the organization for a while. So the vision has already been kind of going for these people. You know, the Jets could have thought that they were 1 year away when they drafted Zach Wilson, or whatever it may be. You know, Trey Lance is in the best situation. I don't think he has the best weapons, but he's by far in the best situation. So to me, it makes not a lot of sense to compare these situations. I understand why you want to do it, but my biggest point is weapons are only a part of the situation. The situation itself is more important than your weapons. And I totally understand. I would love Julio Jones. I know we got Julio Jones. I would love that type of receiver right now. But I think people are really dismissing how important it is that the situation has changed. And I don't think it could have gotten any worse than last year. I think it's that simple. The situation has gotten better for Justin Fields. Allen Robinson didn't do much his last year. Darnell Mooney was the number one last year. So he's the number one this year. You added Pringle. I mean, you look at some of these guys, it's they have a possibility to get upside. Who else was on the team last year? Marquise Goodwin, you know exactly what you're getting from him. You know what you're getting from Damiere Byrd. It's a lot different when you get someone like Byron Pringle, who fought to get reps and is now ascending. He earned his reps in an offense, and then it's hard to get targets in Kansas City when Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce are there. He worked his way into that number 3 role as an undrafted free agent. He's ascending, whereas Goodwin's just a guy that you knew was going to stretch the field and run fast. We really don't know the ceiling on this guy. So chill out with the negativity. I don't think Justin Fields' situation is worse. I think it's a better situation. He's going to be in a better offense, and I think he's going to be more fucking productive. You've already heard about him being built around, and I think we're going to see a lot of fucking deep balls, because Matt Eberflus keeps talking about how great he is at throwing the deep ball. So now you're running from a 21 or 12 personnel. You got everyone bunched in, and you have 2-person routes, but there's only 3 DBs in the back. And it's there's way bigger open holes, and he doesn't need that big of open holes, you know? So now you start running big nickel, trying to prevent from the passing game. And now it's a lighter box. So you're able to get the advantage there. I think strategy comes into it so often, and people are disregarding that, because you're just looking at, okay, who's the player? What was his stats? What's going on?
Yeah, so to that point, I'm really glad you kind of brought that back. That was a really nice little run you went on there, Lucas.
Thanks,
I really appreciate a lot of the information you gave us there. But I'm glad you brought it back to this point when it comes to scheme. The one thing that I never saw with Matt Nagy was it felt like he never looked at a football game as a chess match. And that's how I've always looked at football. It's not about who's on the field. It's not about what personnel you have or anything like that. It's not about having 10 plays scripted. It's about being able to do something on one play and basically doing it until they can stop you. And then once they finally load up, say you can run the football effectively. Say the first 3 plays, you run the football down the gut and you get about 24, 26 yards out of it. You know what I mean? It's oh shit, they're gashing us. We have to bring in more personnel to be able to stop the defense. That's when you jump onto a play action. That's when you jump onto a quick hitting route. That's when you jump onto any other thing. You know what I mean? You don't have this play set in mind. You have this play set in mind if this is how this goes. Say you run the ball 3 times, you get fucking 6 yards out of it. Okay. Then you probably want to maybe adjust what you do from there. It was never I don't want to see any type of big scripting. I understand first 5 plays, whatever, if you want to come out of half with a certain mentality or scheme or however you want to do it. But football is a chess match, and these defensive coordinators know that most of these offensive coordinators are going to be coming out there with a script. And if they can read it within the first 3 to 4 plays, you're probably not going to do much on the first 2 or 3 drives. Football is such a chess match, and I keep coming back to this point, but it's so fucking true. You have to look at it on a play-by-play basis. You have to be able to set the tone with what you're doing on offense, to set the tone of what the defense is doing against you, and then you go from there. You would need to continue to grow within the game. Otherwise, you're just going to go out there, you're going to toss out random plays that you think are going to work, regardless of what the look is that they give you. You might have a kill call, but it's probably not the call that you're still going to be adjusted to at that point, and you're going to go nowhere, similar to what Matt Nagy was doing. And I know that probably sounded like rambling nonsense, but I swear to God, there
No,
is a point
that's
in
exactly the case. I mean, how many times did he just not like? How many times did the Bears have a big play and he just did not know what to run after it? Like we take a delay a game or have to call a timeout. Like how many times did a drive get deflated just because he was not ready? And I think you're 100% right. And the thing too that people aren't realizing is like committing to the run doesn't necessarily mean you have to run the ball 30 times or 20 times, even with one running back. Committing to the run is essentially saying, hey, listen, I finally got a look that's great for a pass, but I'm setting them up for when I need a big play. So I'm going to run into their run front. I'm going to tell them, hey, this is still a threat. So they still keep putting those guys on the field, because then it becomes extremely predictable with what you're going to do. And I think that's the biggest, like when you sometimes like people don't realize like that run on 1st and 10 for a yard and a half sometimes says a lot, it like does a lot to set up the future. And like when you really look at it from a macro perspective and I think that's what Nagy's biggest problem was. It was micro. It was always like, okay, these guys are running on the field. Okay, let's send these guys out. This is how we're going to combat it. It's not all about personnel. It's about how you use the personnel, how you can shift them. Another thing too, this offense is just going to feature a lot more motions, which I'm a huge fan of, because especially for a young quarterback, it's just the easiest tell. Are they in man or in the end zone? You know, like let's have this guy run across the formation to see what they're in. So I don't know. We kind of went into a tangent. Should we get back to
No. Like I like where this has gone. You know what I mean? Like I think that's another good point too, is using motion to be able to see coverages. Like you said, that's really easy for a quarterback. That's a good point. But yeah, you kind of elaborated off of what I was trying to say perfectly. Like it's all about being able to set up for the next one, being able to set up for the next one. Like this is why you see teams come out at halftime after just completely dominating on the ground and be able to hit for like an 80-yard play action touchdown right off the bat. Like that's how you do that, because you have defensive coordinators on their feet. Because honestly, the offensive coordinator has a lot tougher of a job than a defensive coordinator. Like there is a lot less defensive play calls than there are offensive play calls. And a lot of those defensive play calls can cover multiple offensive play calls. So like when you can get a defense coordinator on his feet to where he doesn't quite know what you're going to run, like if you're in I formation and he's still worried about the pass because you've been absolutely gutting him through the air on I formation, then you can gash a fucking 30-yard run with David Montgomery off tackle. You know what I mean? Like that's the type of setups that you have, because they'll stop. They'll hit a point where they'll stop fucking sending out guys to your formation, and they'll just start sending out guys based on what they think you're going to do, even though they honestly have no idea.
Yeah. And I think that's, you're going to love this chart because there's a huge variance in what the Bears ran. Like most team, the Packers here, they ran the entire year. They ran 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 different personnel groupings. Bears ran 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14.
Oh my God.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and the best thing about offensive strategy is like Matt Nagy thinks, or a bad coach is going to think he won because he just completed 4 passes. And now they just went into dime defense and got a bunch of DBs on the field. And the first thing he does is like, you know what, I'm going to get this 10-yard run. And like, that's a win. No, like you keep, it's sometimes it's better to be a dumb football guy. Like sometimes it's just better to be like, no, we're going to out execute you for a while. You're going to commit to this so hard that when we do burn you, it's going to be for the kill shot. It's not going to be for a first down, because that's what our standard is. If we can get a fucking first down in a drive, it's a good drive.
Well, I don't even think it's like a dumb football guy thing. I think it's a lot of successful offensive coordinators can look at the personnel that they have and realize that they can do a lot with that. You know what I mean? It's not, okay, we need these guys specifically to run this. You know what I mean? It kind of goes back to, and any longtime listeners to me and Lucas, what used to drive me nuts about Matt Nagy was whenever you would compare Tariq Cohen to Tyreek Hill, because that kind of put him in a package that kind of limited what he can actually do. Whereas like, dude, you have Tariq play in a certain role, in a certain formation, in a certain package, and like, dude, just find ways to grow plays within that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And that's what the Packers do really well. And that's what makes their offense so damn predictable, because you know, Luke Getsy, we have to be able to talk about that. There is so many times, and I noticed it even in the second half against us last year, they didn't change personnel like at all in the second half.
No,
But
dude.
they did not run the same plays at any point. It was constantly something different. All these guys that were on the field knew how many different possibilities, how many different formations they could run out of just by those guys that are on the field. And it saves on false starts. It saves on delayed games. Like it saves from Justin Fields, your second year quarterback, being a little bit overwhelmed, making sure the right people are on the field at the right time. Like it just being simple isn't being stupid. Being simple is just knowing that you can get just as much production out of what you have on the field compared to sending out different random subs that really don't add anything to the final score.
Yeah. And I mean, to be fair, we are prefacing this with giving the coaching staff the benefit of the doubt. If they start acting like jagoffs, it's going to be instant call outs.
Oh yeah, no, without a doubt. Like I'm really high on Luke Getsy, but like you got to show us something, buddy.
I just feel like the history of what we've seen from this offense, that's what it is. It's, hey, we're going to run. Here's our 6-play package, like just give it Novocaine. It always works. Who is that? Denzel and remember the Titans. I run 6 plays, give it Novocaine. It always works. Like that's it. Like they have their basic concepts that they're always going to run, their bread and butter, that it's like, hey, we're just going to out execute you. And then they just build off of that. Okay. This week they've been really, DBs have been really selling on the post. Now we're going to run it out. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's like little shit like that needs to happen. It doesn't need to be monumental shifts to your offense within each week or from half to half or quarter to quarter. Like you just need to fucking figure out what the defense is trying to do to stop you and just combat that in a very simple way. Like I just don't, it's not fucking rocket science. That's why I call it dumb football guy, because you look, I mean, all these guys, Harbaugh and Shanahan, like he's a little bit more of a scientist looking guy, but either way, like older Shanahan, like those were dumb football guys, that's what they were considered. Obviously very smart offensive minds. So that's just my thought process. I prefer that approach. There are the Andy Reids and Bill Walshes of the world, but still they build up their credibility. Well before they started trying to do all this fucking crazy stuff. They were productive forever.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a lot of experience comes with guys like that. You know what I mean? They didn't just become a head coach 3 years of being an offense coordinator because they, showed out. Andy Reid was in Green Bay for fucking ages. You know what I mean? Like, and that's a guy, Andy Reid, and the reason why what makes him so special is like he can identify talent. He can identify like one thing that one guy does insanely well. Like he doesn't need a team of complete football players. He needs a team of guys that can all come together to do what he wants. He's kind of like Belichickian in that sense, because Belichick's the same way. You don't need, it's nice when you have a Randy Moss, but you don't need that. You can have a Deion Branch, Troy Brown, and fucking Wes Welker and make it work. You know what I mean?
Just look at what they did this offseason, man. They were like, hey, Tyreek Hill's gone. We're not going to replace him. Okay, we got Sky Moore as our deep threat. We have Juju as someone that can pick up underneath. Like, they're not just trying to replace him. It's not like, oh, okay, Taylor Gabriel leaves. Let's replace him with some random fucking dude that runs a 4.340 just and that's going to be, you know what I mean? Like, he's going to run the exact same routes as Taylor Gabriel. He's going to play the same role in the same offense. Like, no, like you need to understand what you have. And make it fucking work. And it's just something he didn't do. But now we're turning into a Matt Nagy podcast.
No, straight up. I actually like this because I really like where this is going. Because I mean, dude, honestly, it's minicamp. What else are we gonna fucking talk about right now?
Yeah.
I just watched Moneyball the other day, and what we're talking about right now kind of reminds me of them explaining fucking the entire process. Like, you don't replace Tyreek Hill. You know what I mean? You don't try to find one person to replace Tyreek Hill. You just try to replace the production. You know what I mean? Like, you don't try to you replace it with speed. Like in the movie, you don't replace fucking John. You don't replace Johnny Damon. You replace someone who can get on base and have similar production to Johnny Damon. You know what I mean? Like, you don't look for the sexy type stuff. Like,
you don't have one mold and then try to fit that mold every single time.
Exactly.
You just create new fucking molds.
Exactly. Like you find someone who can give you production. You find someone who can score you points, because at the end of the day, that's all that fucking matters. As long as you can score points in one way or the other, similar to Moneyball, as long as you can get on base, Like, that's all that matters in the long run, because
Doesn't
getting on
matter if
base
you
scores you
walk, if
runs,
you get hit by a
having speed
pitch.
down the field for a guy like Patrick Mahomes gives you touchdowns and gives you yardage. Like, that's all you need to replace. It doesn't matter who's eating the most. All that matters is everyone's eating.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I just like I will say about OTAs and just in general, like we've already seen Charles Tillman back. Who was it? Richard Dent? I think one of the pass rushers came back. Like we're already seeing old players being welcomed back. And I feel like that's something that kind of got shut out by Emery, I want to say. In that era, when like they just stopped letting people come back. There was like some weird thing. And it even kind of was perpetuated with Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy. Like you saw sometimes, but like they're making it a real emphasis to come in and bring in these guys that were successful before, especially with the DBs and the peanut punch. I know we've heard about Quan Brisker, your boy, has been causing fumbles. Kyler Gordon had like 2 interceptions in OTAs and stuff. So we're hearing reports about guys that are pretty good. But I know, I don't want to steal it from you, but I know you were really upset about the Tevin Jenkins thing. So do you want me to play the clip and then just have you react to it?
Oh yeah, I completely forgot we were going to talk about that.
Yeah, I've been looking at this.
Before that though, Emery is a fucking jagoff, and him just basically killing the entire era before him is a big reason why players didn't want anything to do with him, i.e. letting Urlacher walk for nothing, letting Tillman leave, like basically just breaking up that entire fucking band. But yeah, anyway, continue, because
the difference between Duke Coughlin and Phil Emery, and this is Phil Emery, this is Duke Coughlin. Like,
oh, dude, fucking 100. That is an incredible bobblehead.
Yeah, I got
like,
it.
Dude, I throw out that fucking Joakim Noah energy as much as I can, like in everything I do. But anyway, play this quote because I want to get worked up here at the end.
Okay, let's see if it comes through.
I play wherever they need me. Get in where you fit in.
How do you weigh the prestige of left tackle versus wanting to just find a place where you can contribute?
I don't really know how to answer that. I was coming. So basically, you're saying, how do I weigh? You ask it again. Sorry.
Left tackle is like the premier position on the offensive line. That's like the glory position on the offensive line, if there is one. Is that something that do you care more about just finding a place where you can make a contribution than you do about insisting and trying to be a left tackle?
Yeah, that was better for me. Sorry, but yeah, for me, it's more about where can I be the best for the team, and what can I do, and what certain position is it going to elevate the whole offense for me. That's my personal thing about it.
And for anyone that didn't get to hear the reporter fully, he pretty much said, how do you weigh the prestige of playing left tackle versus being put at right tackle? Duke, the floor is yours.
Okay, so I want to start this just by saying that Tevin Jenkins is a consummate professional with how he answered this question. He could have easily really jumped back at this reporter, and I do not know who this reporter is. I'm sure at some point I'm going to figure it out.
If someone knows, please let us know.
Yeah, I would, because I would love to know who this is, because I will at them on Twitter about this. I genuinely don't care, because this had to have been one of the more ignorant questions that I've heard easily of this offseason. You have Teven Jenkins up here, who is basically saying, yes, I'm moving to right tackle. That's what my coach told me to do. I want to succeed at any position I can on the field, anywhere they want to put me. That is like what you want from an NFL offensive lineman. And what this guy decides to take with this is ask him about the premier position of left tackle, like almost like completely devaluing what a right tackle does on a football field. Okay, so I'm not going to sit here and ignore the elephant in the room about how much more left tackles get paid than right tackles because they cover the quarterback's blind side. We've all seen the fucking movie. We've all seen Michael Orr. That's great stuff. You know what I mean? Like, left tackles are important. We fucking get it. But guys like Ryan Ramczyk, Brian O'Neill, Lane Johnson, Taylor Morton, Jack Conklin, George Fant, Rob Havenstein, Lyle Collins, all at right tackle, Trenton Brown, Panay Sewell, Morgan Moses, Mike McGlinchey. These are all top-tier right tackles in the NFL, and these are all guys on the offensive line who might be better than their left tackle predecessor as it stands right now. Ryan Ramczyk in particular, he basically takes on the power rusher of any NFL team. the way I like to think of it is anyone who was a fan of Khalil Mack this past season or throughout his entire career, guess what? The tackle who is almost always blocking Khalil Mack on an offensive line is the right tackle. That is one of the most tackle, regardless of where it is on the field, is one of the most difficult offensive line positions in all football. That is why tackles consistently get moved inside to either guard positions, because while I'm not trying to devalue what guards do, they do pulling, they move around, they get to linebackers, whatever. They do not have to deal with the edge in the NFL. So to try to say that Tevin Jenkins is somewhat not playing a premier position, it blows me away. It genuinely blows me away. Just because you are not getting paid as much as a left tackle. And I also like that this reporter added that if there is a premier position on the offensive line, as if the offensive line is not the most important position set in the NFL besides maybe quarterback. Like it just absolutely kills me. There are significantly talented players at right tackle. Like they act like it is just a throwaway position that anybody can play there. I can assure you that is just not the case. It is absolutely ridiculous. I would take any of the guys that I named at right tackle in a fucking heartbeat over at least half left tackles in the league, just because of what they do in both the running game and what they do in the rushing game. Because right tackles are actually more consistently the better run blocking of the two, but they also have to have they have to be able to set an edge as an effective offensive lineman, and all the guys that I named have been able to do that. So to say that Tevin Jenkins isn't playing a premier position when they're playing a tackle in the NFL on the offensive side of the football is just it's ludicrous to me.
Well, I mean, I think there's a couple things that I can side with you on, but first, you were wrong about something that's actually in your favor. Like, look at the contract values of a couple of those guys you named. Ryan Ramczyk, almost $20 million a year, 19.2. Brian O'Neill on the Vikings, 18.5 million a year. Lane Johnson on the Eagles, 18 million a year. Braden Smith, 17.5 a year. George, so you listen. My biggest thing is a premier position only gets that label because of how those positions are typically paid when you excel at that position. Offensive line is not. There's nothing premier in terms of showtime about the offensive line. They're not a flashy position. They're not a popular position. But at the end of the day, if you play at a high level, you are a premier player. So left tackle, like premier players and edge rushers is what made left tackles a fucking premier position because there was a huge need there. So at the end of the day, like I think all that shit is insane. I think the biggest thing that bothers me, not even like the shade he throws, I think it's just how he asked the question. Like I think you could have easily gotten the same response and asking the question totally different, right? Because what was Tevin's response? I'm just going to get in where I fit in. Like anything I can do to make this offense be great, I will. So why not just ask, hey, you were slotted as a left tackle with the last regime. Do you prefer left tackle or do you mind moving back to right tackle? You would have gotten the same fucking answer. To me, it's the condescending prickness of like, hey, you were once labeled as a premier position player and now you're no longer labeled that. How do you feel about that? And realistically, I would have more respect for the reporter if he phrased it that way, because then at least he was trying to get that smoke right away. And like Tevin Jenkins asked him to rephrase the question because he's like, what do you mean? Like, did you really just ask me that? Did you just ask me if like I'm a piece of shit now because I play right tackle instead of left? Really bad job by the reporter. And I do like your tweet. I don't know if I looked at it. I don't know if I clicked the like button, but I do like your tweet being like, there's a lot of people out there that I see do great work just on this app alone that would ask a lot better questions than that. That was a dog shit question.
Yeah. And like, I do want to make the point because I'm sure some people will get the idea that I'm like defending Tevin from getting like hardball questions. Cause like, I'm not a fan of softball questions either. I'm just a fan of being able to accurately get your point across. You know what I mean? Like that was just such a backhanded type comment to get a fucking answer out of him. Whereas you could, kind of phrase it like you said, Lucas, like you played left tackle last year. You're playing right tackle this year. What is the position that you prefer? Like, how do you feel about moving there? How do you feel, does this feel like a downgrade to you? Even if you would ask it like that, you know what I mean?
That's fine.
I guarantee Tevin would have jumped back and said, no, I'm just trying to do what's best for what's best for the football team.
He phrased it like a lot of fucking the pricks on Twitter, to be honest. Like the people that we all know who they are, they come off as super condescending. He was just like, you are no longer a premier guy. How do you feel about that? Is what he was insinuating. Like, I would have fucking rather heard him say, do you think this means the regime lost faith in you as a left tackle? I would have been fucking happy with that. Better, even, like, because that's like just the way he said it. It was like, I'm not willing to actually say it, but I'm definitely going to make sure, like, I'm going to phrase it in a way that says this is the way it is. There's no room for negotiation there. Like, this is how it is. You, like, left tackle is the premier position. Now you're on the outside looking in. How do you, like, it's just, dude,
like, if you want to throw a fastball, throw a fucking fastball. Like, that's more or less what I'm getting at. I just hate that he kind of like put Tevin in this weird position to be like, what the fuck did this guy just say? You know what I mean? And like, I don't know. It completely devalued every right tackle in the league with the way that question was asked. I guess that's probably what bothered me the most, because like, I know you're talking about salaries of these right tackles, and that's because a lot of teams really appreciate what a great right tackle can do for you. You know what I mean? Like Philly with the issues they've had at left tackle in the past few years, they could probably put Lane Johnson there, and he'd probably be pretty fucking good at left tackle, but they don't, because they like it what he does at right tackle. Same with Ryan Remchek, dude. You can move him to left tackle, but they seem to really like what he fucking does at right tackle. So to completely devalue what a great right tackle can do for you is like really, I think, what bothered me the most, because it's
yeah. And if you really look at what the Bears are trending towards doing right now, right tackle does seem like the more premier position. Like, if you were paying attention about how they're going to go run heavy and how right tackles are, usually your first line, your aggressor on the offensive line in terms of the running game. That's what you want your right side for. That's the strong side of your formation. A lot of times on the right side. So it's like, it's almost like, hey, if we're really going to be this run heavy team with play action, you're asking him to do a lot fucking more than you're going to be asking Borum to do. You're just going to ask Borum to make sure to seal the outside when Justin Fields is rolling opposite of you. And you're going to be taking that major blunt front of the face. Right. So I just think it's wild, dude. It's funny because that whole, I don't know if you remember the snitch tag fiasco that happened like
a
week or so ago, but that's what this reminds me of. Like, you can fucking tag whatever reporter on any time we say, we don't know who it is, but I'd have no problem saying it to him. And so please snitch tag all you want.
Yeah, no, please. I highly recommend you snitch tag, because like snitch tag is like the softest. Not the act of doing it, but the act of getting upset over snitch tagging is the softest shit ever. If we ever talk about anybody on this show, tag them gladly. Like, we will gladly address it, even if it's a fucking player. Like, we will gladly talk about it with them. You know what I mean?
Well, I feel like we treat everyone with respect. That's why, like, we're not like, other than Matt Nagy, really, like, we're not sitting here being like, oh, this guy fucking sucks, or this guy fucking sucks, and then the next week being like, oh, we love him. It's like, I feel like we're pretty objective about that stuff. Hopefully that comes through to the listeners,
We're fucking honest, dude. We are on brand with who we are.
I will support every football take I have ever made on this app and own it. So yeah, I have no problem if you report someone in it.
Yeah, and I mean, if I'm totally wrong, I'm totally cool with admitting that too. I'm not going to sit around and pretend like I've been right the entire time.
Yeah, we might need to wrap up. I know there's tornado warnings, but my Wi-Fi is getting real sketchy. There's so much.
You're good. We've been
hitting my building right now.
We've been rolling on about Jack Offery for a while.
Yeah,
I'm sure the listeners are appreciating us cutting it here. And we've been going for about an hour anyway, but
yeah.
So this is a good spot to stop. This has been the Barely There podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Anchor. Subscribe to us on YouTube if you want to chat. Come into the chat or whatever. Ask us your questions directly. We always appreciate that. We always like shooting it with any fans of the show. If you try chatting with us on Twitter through that live feed, we will not get those comments, unfortunately. So YouTube is going to be your best bet. So if any of you have been sending comments to the Twitter, we're sorry. We have no way of seeing them, guys. It's just not going to work. But yeah, try to give us a rating. Thanks again for listening, guys. I know me and Lucas are Jagoffs, and we're just kind of looking for stuff to talk about during the off season. But really appreciate all the support, man. We've been seeing those listens. We appreciate what you guys have been putting in for us.
Yeah, we might even have to go to a every other week format because it's just, I mean, we always find something to talk about. I guess we'll figure that out as it comes on. But we do love you guys and appreciate you guys for listening.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and more or less just look at it as right now, if we were to take a week off, just maybe don't hold it against us. Like, I mean, Lucas's DMs are open if you really want to call him a jag-off for not recording for a week. Mine are wide open as well. You can straight call me out on the timeline. I love that shit.
Dude, I got a premium Zoom subscription. I'll give you the Zoom link so you can yell at me and see my face if you really want that.
Yeah, no, yelling at Lucas and seeing his like immediate reaction in his face is actually like top 5 favorite moments for me personally. So highly recommend that, dude. I can handle this shit too. I'm down in Chicago all summer. Come find me on a Saturday. Tell me how fucking shitty I am. It's cool. But anyway, I got nothing more. Bear down, guys. Thanks for listening.
Bear down.